I grant you this thing. Hello and welcome to the Fervent Four. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? Hello, I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I'm my co-host Tim Ryan, lead man at startwheel.org. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent Four is a weekly show dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business, no matter the climate. Meet Phillip Deng, Grantable founder, connecting folks who want grants to those who can help them win them. Nothing like winning. I mean, winning was a thing that got super big. Like, what was that guy's name when he created that hashtag winning? What was that guy's name?
Oh,
The
that was
guy,
Charlie Sheen.
Sheen. Yeah. What does winning mean to you, Philip? And I know it's the most ridiculous first question that you would have expected. But as I said the word win, I was like, winning. Yes, that's what people want.
Firstly, thanks for having me on the show, and for serving up a great first question. So, first thing that popped into my mind for winning, we had a conversation, my co-founder and I, recently about something like this, and I would say, on a day-to-day basis, like having your food taste good, good conversations, and when you go to sleep, you sleep well because you feel like you put in a solid day's effort, and it mattered to what you're doing. So that to me is how I'm measuring wins these days.
And I feel like that's something that you can control to some extent, right? And if you had a process to know it, I mean, you can make the food taste good, right? You can go into your day and you can prepare and things like that. And from a grantable perspective, there's a process of people. Yeah, my guess is people who, and we're going to get into the whole grantable aspect of it, but those who apply for grants or go for a job, the reason some of them lose is because they don't follow the correct process to start, so they get weeded out. And so if you add a little salt and pepper in there, if you will, just like you would on your food, things can get better.
100%. I think I think I'm hearing you say is, I think there's two components. There's your mindset, which I think has a huge influence on how you perceive what's happening to you, whether it's sort of glass half full or half empty. Is this a win or is this a setback? And then the other component, I think, is your process and how you prepare. So that obviously is important in a day-to-day as an entrepreneur, but then also in the specific context of going after grants, which is my main background. I've only been a technology entrepreneur for a little over a year now, or actually a little less than a year. So that's really new for me. But prior to that, I had a 15-year career in the nonprofit space mostly. So a lot of work with grant-funded organizations. And when you're talking about grants or going after funding to support your enterprise, there are some basic things you want to do. You want to have a really clear idea of what you do and how you communicate that. There's your basics of financial management and how you communicate your work with numbers. And then there's kind of organization, like where are you storing all of your materials and how are you tracking all the opportunities that you're going after so that you can be as efficient with the process as you can. Just getting a lot of grants out the door is partially about capacity, but it's also partially about how you kind of use these different tricks to get more mileage out of your writing.
Yeah, I want to step back. We talked for a couple of minutes before we started recording this episode, and you're fairly well traveled in the sense of Seattle, Boston area. I first found out about you at 757 Accelerate in Norfolk, and now you're in Richmond. Talk to me a little bit about your journey along the way and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. There's even more destinations than that. I was, born in San Francisco, grew up in Minnesota and China for 3 years doing nonprofit work. And all of these different places have obviously shaped who I am and my perspective. And I think one of the main ways that it comes into play is when you're dealing with people in all these different areas. there are some commonalities that you learn how to work with, and then there are big differences. And sometimes, especially if you don't speak the language, for instance, learning Marshallese, like bringing my Mandarin up to a level. There's both kinds of skills, learning what people have in common and how to work with people's differences, I think has been a big part of my journey.
So where were you when you first heard about 757 Accelerate? And I would like to hear a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I was here in Richmond, Virginia, and I had just finished my first startup accelerator here in Richmond called Lighthouse Labs. And then I think because the Virginia startup ecosystem is really kind of on the ascendance, and there's a lot of communication between these companies. 757 had reached out and kind of publicized their opportunity, the accelerator, and a little bit tongue in cheek. So the first piece of software I built for Grantable was a tool to make grant writing faster, which I developed when I was a professional contract grant writer. And so that's what I actually went through the first accelerator with. So I had that, and again, a little tongue in cheek, I used my software to apply for 757 really fast, because that's what the software did. And I told them that, and I kind of created a video even, and I said, hey, this application only took me about 30 or 45 minutes, whatever it took. And it's kind of it's a demo of the product that I'd like to work on in your accelerator. So that's how I kind of got into it.
It's a pretty lengthy application process. I've helped a couple companies, and I've got part of the evaluation team it's pretty lengthy and fairly redundant.
Right, and it's relevant to the grant space, because grant applicants experience a very similar thing, where a lot of the different proposals are asking for similar information, and the more skillfully you can organize your content library and then grab the pieces you need, you can gain back some time and be able to apply for more grant opportunities in the same way. So that was the first tool I built. We've pivoted a little bit, and that's now a feature on our roadmap. But yeah, that's how I got into 757.
It's interesting because I think about just like applying to a lot of speaking gigs, right? So if I do a decent amount of professional speaking, I guess is the correct terminology or something like that, and they all ask you the same damn questions. The simple stuff like what's your name and what's the the topic and things like that. But then deeper on, kind of, I guess, just like these similar applications, it's like. Mm-hmm. Like maybe this question is being asked a little differently, but the answers are almost always the same. And so if people who have to sit there and like think, oh my gosh, what am I going to say to this? It's like, hold on a second. You did this once, the answer. Like you could just have a Google Doc open and save it in there. Or it sounds like you could have something from like a feature of Grantable that would be able to fill it for you. And I think more people need to just have something like that so that their life can be made easier. So kudos to you for doing that. And I love the fact that you used your own tool to apply. I mean, that's like super groovy. And I would hope that if you were selling something like that, you did use the tool. And so kudos to you for doing that. You said 15 years in tech before that. The first time.
No, sorry. 15 years in like the nonprofit sector. Just into tech now for less than a year. So this is new for me.
Got it. Okay. I took my notes wrong. Okay. So 15 years as a nonprofit guy, 1 year ish into kind of tech type of thing. How do you learn how to do technology? How do you become a CEO? I think there's a lot of people that are, on the fence thinking about doing something like that. Is it just, figure it out, or how did you kind of get into that groove?
Well, I started a nonprofit before. So there are a few lessons that I could take from that, as far as, having a vision, talking to enough people that you feel like there's interest in going a few steps further than just an idea. So there's that. But as far as technology, it's been a steep learning curve. I enjoy learning, and I think a lot of nonprofit sector folks that hear this can probably relate in that a lot of times you're wearing a ton of hats. And so learning becomes this really important skill that you have a lot of opportunity to practice. So I picked up a bunch of stuff. I mean, just everything from throwing together a website and stitching together your standard business suite of business tools to actually, I was really deep into bubble.io, which is one of these no code platforms. So I was working up prototypes and full on open beta versions of software that I shared out to people. And I just taught myself how to do that. So I, watched some videos, but I actually found it pretty fun. I like building things. I built my the inside of my camper van myself. So again, kind of learned how to do all the electrical and woodworking and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of motivation from it being fun and enjoying learning about a new subject like technology. But the other side of it too is I often felt really overwhelmed. And when you're the person out there kind of selling the idea and quietly that you're also the person that's going to have to build the tech to deliver on these promises, I never felt like I could fully be out there advocating because I was a little bit hesitant about, can I actually, cross the bar that I'm setting for myself. And so, yeah, it's been tough. It's been a real growthful year as far as how I push myself.
And you just brought on a co-founder, is that right?
Yeah, and that's been transformative.
In terms, did you when looking for a co-founder, is your co-founder tech? Is he experienced in the tech side? So did you balance one another out?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a story I reflect on a lot. His name's Robert. He's a really experienced full stack engineer, and we met just literally in passing in this co-working space, and we stopped to chat, like water cooler type chat, where we just kind of shared about what we were working on, and then for months we would just kind of catch up if we saw each other. But what was happening was sometimes I would kind of dive into what he was working on and we'd really sort of hash out ideas, and then vice versa. Sometimes he would really dive into my space and ask lots of great questions, check out the stuff that I was building, talk through some different ideas. And then we just got closer and closer. And then eventually when I pivoted from the writing tool to the marketplace model, I think everything sort of crystallized for him, all the conversations we'd had. And he kind of said, well, you know what, if you're interested, I'd like to build this with you. And so it was a very sort of organic coming together, and more so than just his technical ability. There was definitely sort of that chemistry where we enjoyed like spending time talking, learning about each other. And then we also still took our time. We did a co-founders questionnaire with like 50 questions that's circulating around the internet, where they're deep questions about your work
it's a
style.
marriage. I mean,
it
right?
is,
I mean,
right.
Yeah, and you're going in with someone, yeah.
So we went through that and we shared, we took a good amount of time to go over our answers together. All 50 of them went through it and just kind of really wanted to see if this was the right way to go. So fortunately, it's been awesome. I tried some co-founder matching platforms. I had some misfires where people were enthusiastic, but then, it didn't quite line up in the right way. So it was tough going. And those were the most sort of anxiety producing experiences for me, because they're relationships, they're people I really care about. I don't want anybody to be upset or feel that they haven't, gotten what they wanted out of a relationship. And so I'm really grateful to finally be where I am with a co-founder.
It's interesting that you use some other tools to try to match you. Tim, I can't remember if I knew you when we were doing this, but there was something that we had hosted like that in Norfolk I mean, 10 years ago, and it was like co-founder dating or something like that. And like, to me, like the way that you just explained that, Philip, like it has to be organic. It's literally like, hey, like I met this person. It went a little further. It went a little further. It went a little further. And like I've yet to see, and maybe I just don't have enough case studies in front of me to see a lot of things like a matchmaking service like that fulfill, because there's so much that has to go into it. And so it's cool to hear that story of water cooler towards co-founder aspects of that. Tim, do you have other questions on?
I'm just, so how long, or when did you first know you needed a co-founder? And what pushed you to the point where you wanted to make that commitment to have a co-founder?
So I knew before I started Grantable that I wasn't doing this to be on my own. When my nonprofit that I started in Seattle, that was a pretty difficult experience for me. I mean, when I started it, I think I was 26 or 25. I hadn't ever done anything even remotely close to that. And it was both a really vibrant, captivating idea that a lot of people contributed to in different ways. But then on the back end, partially because I was an inexperienced fundraiser, we were always just about broke. And so it was a financially really difficult time for me, for the organization. We just kind of never really had the resources we needed. And I was always relying on volunteers for just about everything that we were doing. And so what I was constantly experiencing was people taking on responsibility, but then sort of handing it back. And what happens as the venture grows is there's more and more responsibility being handed out and handed back. And so I was just so stretched thin and so worn out by the end when the venture didn't take off, and I was at it for 5 years. So working other jobs, just trying every possible way to belt tighten and grit it out. And I would have done it very differently. But one of the lessons that I drew from that was, gosh, if you really want something to be durable and resilient and fun and enjoyable, I really wanted a partner. I wanted a team. I wanted this to be an experience. It's kind of like, trudging up a mountain on your own. I mean, some people maybe do that, but to me, it becomes fun if you've got a good friend with you and you're experiencing the hardship together. It becomes stories, it becomes laughs, it becomes,
different sides of that, to see it from just different, I see it this way, I see it that way, even though you're doing the exact same thing at the same time.
That's absolutely. Cool. So, in summary, I've had a lot of time where, not by choice, but, maybe because I wasn't putting out the right energy, or I wasn't creating the space for somebody to plug in, just because I was still kind of learning how to build organizations, how to work on projects. But I had a lot of time where I felt very on my own, and I knew that didn't feel good. I knew that didn't leave me in a good place, or the work. So from the very beginning, I was hoping that there would be somebody coming along that I could link up with. And it didn't happen right away, as I was saying. And it didn't necessarily come from like an intentional source. But I think I was always open to it. I was always hoping for it. I was always trying to learn from my mistakes in the past, and trying to become a different kind of collaborator to make that partnership happen.
Well, I mean, it's really, really important. I appreciate you showing, a vulnerable side of yourself and telling that story, because I mean, it is really, really important to have that co-founder. A lot of, if you're doing the accelerator thing, that's really important to have a co-founder. From an investment side, investors want to see that you have a co-founder. And a lot of times, you being able to sell Grantable to establish that co-founder, that's almost your first customer. And if you can't sell your vision and your company to find a co-founder, then that's the first sign that something is off. So that's why I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about that, because it is really, really important. So I appreciate you sharing that. Did you get feedback from accelerators or from investors? I'm assuming that you're raising because you've gone through some accelerators. Was that an important piece that people were looking for? It was a co-founder?
I mean, a lot of folks just post it out there. I mean, it's, if you talk about like YC, they're always saying, we prefer groups with co-founders. So, I mean, I think it's almost common knowledge at this point. We are just about to go after our first outside funding. So I think already just the way that some of the investors we've been building relationships with are responding to the news that I found a co-founder, I think you can kind of tell that it's like, awesome. Oh, that's the Grantable is now way more resilient. Grantable is now 100%. Way stronger, more likely to be able to weather any storms that are coming. So I think that's being felt. Nobody's kind of said it explicitly to me, but I've asked for that help. So a lot of times I've said, I'm looking for collaborators. I'm looking for, there's room in this enterprise for other folks to come in. So I've always been pretty open about that. So yeah, I think it's been mutual. There's nobody's kind of challenged me and said, hey,
that's great.
Have you? Yeah.
Good on you.
When it comes to the bubble aspect of it or the no code aspect of it, obviously you built what sounds like your, V1, your alpha, maybe even your beta version from something like a no code tool like a bubble.io. A couple of our previous guests have as well. I'm interested to hear how the new co-founder who is technical comes in and receives something like that, and is it ultimately like that the bubble stuff becomes trash? Does he build off of the bubble? Does he start from zero? Like how does that happen? Because it's my understanding that bubble is its own kind of language, right? And then you now have someone else who's a full stack developer. He might be writing in who knows what. Is he going to restart from there? And is there conversations there? Like how does that whole thing go down?
Well, because it's a good question. I won't speak for all scenarios. I'll just tell you what happened with us. It worked out because I had built the first tool in Bubble, and then I was pivoting to a marketplace. So we didn't really have the need to translate what I had built into the new software because we needed something different. So Robert was actually seeing me build the marketplace in Bubble and was like, oh, wait a minute, like why don't we do this my way? And I was more than
so it kind of started from scratch again because of that, because you're building a new tool at that point.
Yes, but what I will say about Bubble and the whole experience, having spent, I don't know how much time, hundreds, maybe certainly hundreds of hours in Bubble myself, it taught me sort of how to understand the layers of software as far as like from the back end, the database, all the way to the front, and how these things are sort of working. So that's helped bridge the gap between, I think I'm like a semi-technical founder now. So I'm not at zero when I'm talking to Robert. And more than that, I wasn't having to just describe what I was talking about. He actually went into my tool and clicked around and looked at it. And, he gained an understanding of when he considered me as a potential co-founder, right? I mean, he came in, but like, he doesn't just want to jump into any scenario. He's now seeing, oh, Phil kind of gets software. He might not be able to write code like I do, but we can communicate conceptually in a way that maybe is different than I would have been able to without that experience.
I would imagine Tim would agree with this. One of the hardest things that non-technical founders have is and who want to build some sort of app or some sort of software play is understanding the layers to a platform, and how even just general users not understanding that, hey, it's not just putting up a button there. That button has 17 different features actually, and 27 different layers, and like it's not as easy. I think people are like, oh, I'm just going to build the next Facebook. It's like, okay, well, Facebook is 18 years old. It has how many thousands of users, or how many thousands of employees after how many, like, it's just like, that's kind of an impossible thing. Like so kudos for you for figuring that out.
Yeah, I think it was a great step. It allowed me to just start taking the idea out of my mind, putting it out there for people to try and use. I was using my first prototype when I was still writing grants for people. I would put all of my clients' existing proposals into the tool I built, and I'd be able to spin up a draft for them in no time, and they were just like, wow, how do you work so fast? And I was like, well, I'm just using this thing. So I mean, it's been cool. There's skills that I still use. I mean, I still have to do some of our design, our graphic design sometimes here in the early going. So it's all really, you put it in your toolkit, and then it's there for forever. And so I think it's been really valuable. I think Bubble is also changing, growing in terms of what it's capable of. So I think there are already companies that are just launching fully on Bubble. That's not the direction that we're going to go in, and I think we have specific reasons for that. And leveraging Robert's incredible abilities and experience himself, it just makes sense for us too.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, so this is another thing that you did right. If you think about how much time or how much money you would have spent to pay a developer to do the things that you were able to figure out in Bubble, I mean, you saved, you learned so much. You were able to establish an MVP and kind of prove, validate your idea. And then once you know that you've validated, then you can take that next step. And then someone like Robert can come in and then start to build things from a full stack point of view. But I mean, you've saved a ton of time. You validated, you got the MVP, and now you're off to the races. So that's what current founders or people that are thinking about founding a startup, that's the approach that they can take. And investors are okay with that. They would much rather you validate the idea before you try to raise a ton of money from an investor without validation first.
Well, an outside developer is going to do I'm bashing a lot of outside developers, but I mean, like, having that outside team can be such a catastrophic, like, it's just so difficult to see those things succeed. And like, people are like, oh, I'm just going to hire this, overseas company. It's like, there's not a lot of, from things that I've seen, that have great use cases or case studies of success from that, because there's so many moving layers of that. It's like, hey, once it gets out, by the way, then people want to change stuff, and you got to wait 6 weeks because you don't have an internal team. I mean, it's just, it can be a disaster. And people don't want to hear that, but that's the truth.
If I can add something for folks, in my position listening, so before I knew of Bubble, I actually, did a mock-up of what I was talking about. I don't remember, in Canva or something, just like a PowerPoint kind of thing. And I showed a friend of mine who's a software engineer. And what I think Bubble allows is for not much more work than just sketching out what it looks like. I mean, you have to learn how to link stuff up, but for not too much more, you could actually have something that has action to it. Exactly, just taking that idea out and not needing a developer from the very get-go, I think is a powerful tool. I'll say there's a side to be wary of, though, especially if you're on your own, like I was. It can feel very safe, and it can feel like you're making progress and doing something if you just spend hours and hours in there, modifying the color of a button, or, oh, should it have, rounded corners, or should it be square? And I made that mistake, when other stuff was scary, when there wasn't progress happening, or I didn't want to share this out and get feedback or potential criticism. You can always just go back to your Bubble and make it a little bit better, make it a little bit better. And I just caution people, if you find yourself, suddenly missing meals because you're in there, just building out more and more and more and more features. That's the challenging side of a bubble, is you can go so fast, so inexpensively, but not realize that you're actually, skipping over testing or getting feedback. So I will just say that was something I had to pull back on, was I can spend all day in bubble, I can do it myself, wow, I'm so empowered. But then you run the risk of being on your own, being in your own little, headspace, and not really letting people interact with what you're doing. So I would say that's the drawback. Whereas if you were working with a developer, you're really thinking twice about, do I really need this button because it's going to cost me, this much money to do? Do I really need this? And that inhibition goes away. So I will just caution people out there, get into it, but then you now need to create those feedback loops and get it out to other people who will give you feedback on what you're doing, because you can move so much more quickly on your own.
They're a 10-year-old business, Bubble. I just did some quick crunch base. I didn't realize how 250 plus employees. They've raised $107 million. I didn't realize they were good for them.
It's really cool. It's a beautiful project, and I think it's really well-meaning, hopeful, aspirational people at that company, and it's cool. It is just really cool what you can do with it.
Well, and it took a while for them to find their product market fit, and there is this from a developer side. I mean, everyone always would bash the whole WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get movement, and now it seems like it's starting to take hold. So yeah, good for
them. Timing is really such an outsized factor in everything that we do.
So where's Grantable today? I mean, we've talked a lot about how you got to where you are. Tell us about the product and what you have going on.
Yeah, so we're at a really exciting phase. We're, I guess, about a month out from we launched the ability for grant experts. So most people think of grant writers. They can now create profiles on Grantable that look really great, and they're unique in that they feature the information that we actually need to get across in our sector. So your subject matter expertise, you can tag yourself with, I've done a lot of arts grants, or I've done legal aid or food security. So that's really important for the experts and their clients to know what you specialize in. You can create a portfolio of the actual grants you worked on, because again, if you can hire somebody who's already worked on the grant before, that I can't tell you how valuable that is, to have that inside track on how to save time, how to write the grant well. And then the specific services as well. So some people will help you find grants. Some people don't want to do that. So just making it much easier for these folks to communicate what they do and how much they charge. So the profiles are live. We're reaching out in a very manual way in these early days, very, very hands-on, trying to talk to everybody that's signing up. So I think we have about 35 grant experts signed up. And we're trying to focus on Washington State, where I used to live and have a strong network, and then here in the Virginia area as well. But we're actually seeing signups from other places as well, even internationally. We've gotten some folks signed up from Canada and Mexico, which is really cool. So early days, we're going to go at this for a few more weeks just to build a critical mass of the service providers, or sort of the supply side of our market. And then we've got sort of a similar but more scaled up approach on the client side. So these would be nonprofits or businesses likely that will need grant support. So we'll kind of do a similar playbook. I've got a bunch of personal contacts that I will reach out to personally and say, hey, check out all of these awesome experts that you can easily filter down and message. And we're building out the communications to really mimic some of the other really well-designed marketplaces like Airbnb. So the messaging should be super slick and very, very, very seamless for people to get in touch and start figuring out if they want to work together. So that'll launch. We should have messaging done within the next couple of days. We'll just test that. And then, our plan is around the end of the month, we'll open up and connect both sides and kind of see what starts to happen. So it's a super exciting time. And the grant experts we've gotten in touch with are just really cool people. They are willing to talk to us. They are sharing insights. We're learning about different regulations around the country that we need to be mindful of. And then on the nonprofit side too, that's where we're starting. We're focusing on nonprofits to kind of as our first client side market, expanding into businesses. But again, you're talking to people who are just really open, working on very inspiring projects in communities that it's always interesting to learn about. So that's just a bonus. Like the people that are our customers, that are our users, are of great interest to me. That's the community that I've come from my career. So it's just awesome to learn about what they're doing. So that's kind of the phase that we're in.
And this is, I mean, so it's an $800 billion industry that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So when you launch, I mean, so is there a certain part of the nonprofit area that you're going after? Is it going to be larger federal grants, or what's your focus?
So to be clear, it's a lot of people think of nonprofits when they think of grants, but the number you just cited, about $80 billion a year comes from private grant makers. So think of foundation grant makers. 720 billion is public grant funding. So federal government down through states and municipalities. It's an enormous amount. $800 billion goes out in the form of grants every year in just the US. And what we're talking about there, we've estimated there are probably about 30 million grant applications. I'm about to write one for Grantable, but about 30 million applications are produced every year to apply for that $800 billion. And applications take anywhere from 5 to 200 hours to complete based on, how complex it is. So you're talking, if you conservatively estimate, 20 hours per application, you're talking about 600 million hours of labor to move that $800 billion from point A to point B every year. So about 300,000 man years or person years to get that money from A to B. So
I'm curious.
That's
I mean, as I'm sitting here thinking, one thing that popped in my head is college scholarship money. Is that considered a grant, or if yes, if no, is that something that you would consider going after? Because it's some crazy stat out there that millions and millions of dollars goes unused from a college scholarship standpoint.
I mean, conceptually, those are grants. You're applying for them. You're making your case. You're either awarded or not. I think maybe there are some sort of ethical angles to consider if it's a one-time grant really to support an individual's education. You might be able to kind of think about it like, well, maybe this person really should represent themselves. Kind of like maybe you wouldn't necessarily want somebody to apply for a job for you because you really want to understand, are you a good fit? But it's these grants that are year in, year out, repetitive. It's for the same program. That's where I think a lot of time can be given back to business leaders, nonprofit leaders. Once you've written a few grants and you've gotten down what you're trying to communicate, you've created your budget, there are other responsibilities that these folks really have. And can we create a place, a platform online where they can handle their grant seeking, in a much more efficient way? Can we take that 600 million hours and start shrinking that? Can we allocate that to a gig economy and a legion of different individuals out there who specialize in particular kinds of grant seeking? Can we just be more efficient about moving all that money from where it begins to the innovation and the justice initiatives that it needs to fund? So can it take less labor to move that from point A to point B? And we believe we can do that in this phase through connectivity, but in future phases, we think that there is technology. We think we can leverage AI and natural language recognition to actually help make that even more efficient to get that funding where it needs to go.
These are going to be, I don't have like a fact checker in front of me, so these are just things that I'm going to say from over time. But I believe I heard that like a lot of nonprofits, 90% of nonprofits money goes towards their staff, which doesn't necessarily mean towards the thing that they're trying to do. Now, granted, with that staff might be trying to fix those things, so that stat could be taken out of context. But I wonder how much of that staff is then recycling every year to try to bring in some of that those grant dollars in there. So that was one of the first things that came to mind. I don't know if you've heard a stat like that, but
yeah, that would be a really high number just based on my experience working with different clients. They're generally not spending that much on personnel, and they're actually evaluated a lot of times by how low they can keep their administrative costs and how much they can dedicate to programming. What I'll say, I think, is an unfair characterization or almost a stereotype of nonprofits is that they just don't know what they're doing and they're so inefficient. When in fact, the reality is that nonprofits, unlike private sector businesses, are essentially having to run two organizations in one with one set of resources and personnel, where a business can just operate and its revenue is directly linked to everything in its operation. Nonprofits have this really challenging scenario where the way they make money is entirely decoupled from the service they provide. So they have to run a money-making operation while running a service provision operation. Nobody is going to pay you for, operating your food bank. The people that come in for the food are not paying for the food.
Yeah.
So you have to go out and run this whole thing to justify your work, which is an enormous just amount of work in and of itself. So nonprofits, have this reputation of being understaffed, under-resourced. It's because the way that we as a society have decided that this work is going to get done, it's going to get done by nonprofits who have this additional layer of burden where you have to run essentially a grocery store, and then you have to run nonstop fundraising campaigns, grant seeking, gala events. You got to go and get all these things for an auction, like just to get money to pay for your grocery store. So a regular grocery store just takes your money for a can of soup and it's all factored in and it runs smooth. So people wonder, why can't this food bank just get its act together? Well, it's because the people are getting food for free, and then the staff are out there year in, year out trying.
We lost your audio, Philip.
Is it back?
There you go.
Okay. Sorry. Hopefully most of that came through. But anyway, just a soapbox for nonprofits.
What's interesting is I have heard something like that as well. And a lot of nonprofits, specifically nonprofits in this, and I don't know if this is a Southeastern Virginia problem or just all across America, but a lot of these nonprofits that start will get their first grant, but it's very difficult for them to get that second round in there. Is that just because they're working on the business and can't actually get the grant out there? And does something like Grantable help that? Like, where do you see, is that a true story in there? Like
the statistics I've read are actually in reverse. The first grant is so hard because you don't necessarily have a track record to run on. After that, getting another grant is statistically from the studies I've seen more likely.
I'm getting a lot of weird news.
So it's not easy, but I think if that getting started, like for for-profits, that first your lead investor can be a big challenge. I think a similar type of psychology is happening in the nonprofit space. But I think to your point as well, In the early phases of grant seeking, you're kind of trying to get your first. If you're sort of a middle applicant where you've gotten a few grants, what you're trying to do is diversify where your grants are coming from. And if you're a really mature organization, what you're trying to do is increase the amounts of the grants you're going after, or even reach sort of national level funders. So the big ones that are giving, multi-million-dollar awards, and you're sort of implementing, maybe across state lines or in larger geographies or larger scopes of work. And so in some ways it's similar to the private sector.
Interesting. In terms of, as you bring on the subject matter experts with the grant process, and you build out your marketplace, do you have some sort of evaluation piece in there to make sure that there is some sort of accuracy or level of expertise that the people that use your service can rate those subject matter experts on?
Yeah, so there will be a review feature, similar to a lot of, every marketplace I can think of has review features that are really, really important. I think where we need to focus our thinking is how do we create the right categories and system for ratings and feedback that is helpful to our sector. So I just wrote a blog post about win rates. And every grant writer has been asked, and we all kind of roll our eyes because it's not a very good metric for the quality of the writer. The expert should be helping you produce better grants, more grants. They should be helping you get organized. They should be helping you think more strategically. But as I just went over with Zack, if a grant writer works with you, an early stage nonprofit, for example, and you get rejected 9 times in a row, but that 10th one is your first grant and they've stuck with you and helped you reach that milestone to get you going, get the ball rolling, they should not be dinged for having a 10% success rate. They should be celebrated for keeping your spirits up and sticking with you through all that. Whereas if you're, if you're the, United Way or something, and you get a grant that they've gotten for the last 10 years running, and they didn't really change it, it was a foregone conclusion, but you got 100% success rate, that's not a very meaningful stat. So we just want to make sure that
it's almost a vanity metric.
Yeah, 100%.
It is. It's
kind
a bit
of like,
of
hey,
a vanity
money.
metric.
Yeah,
but there are meaningful ways to evaluate, and then there are certifications too. There's a lot of content and curriculum out there about how to be an effective grant professional. So we're paying a lot of attention to that. We're in talks with the Puget Sound Grant Writers Association out in the near Seattle, Washington, where I used to live and have a lot of relationships. So we're learning a lot from. They're one of the oldest grant writers associations in the country, and so they really know their stuff in terms of the ethics of the profession, best practices, like all kinds of tips and tricks, and then they've got some really wonderful, really experienced individuals as members and as their board leadership. So we're really trying to come at this not like we have all the answers, but there is really, really good knowledge out there that we want to base our company upon as well.
I'm curious also from if you received any feedback from the reviewer side. So like if people that use Grantable, is there less errors or less back and forths that need to take place? So then you're saving the reviewers a lot of time and money as well. Have you received any feedback on that?
Yeah, and somebody said to me, if you've met one private foundation, then you've met one private foundation. So they really do have their own personalities and their own perspectives. And so we've heard exactly as you said. Some folks are like, wow, yeah, this would be a much better way to not only reduce the number of ill-fitting applications that we receive, but also improve application quality. So some people see the optimistic side of this, which I think is important, because the grant makers, the grantors, if they put out an opportunity and they get 200 submissions, but 150 of them are not really what they're looking for. That's a lot of wasted time and effort. So an intermediary can really help as a screening mechanism. But then we've also heard some people that say, well, we really want to hear the applicant in their own voice. And, that can come from a number of angles. Some people, if they really genuinely value the applicant's voice and are, open to different styles of writing, different ways of conveying information, I think that can be really great. But there is definitely a documented trend where if people write in a way, create their proposals in a way that doesn't conform to maybe a traditional or sort of a voice that centers sort of the white community in this country, that they can be dinged for that, writing differently, communicating differently. And so if it's coming from that kind of place, then I think that's problematic. And so we want to definitely push back and kind of say, in some way, we need to, make sure the playing field is level. Either anybody can hire an expert to come in and help you format this the way that you want, or you got to accept how people communicate natively in their own way and do your part to understand what they're saying and see the work they're doing. So it's an interesting challenge to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, I almost really see that as the grantor could be almost a third leg in your in a marketplace stool, in the sense of, if I was a grantor and I knew that I was going to get quality applications with zero errors and not have to sift through 75% error rate, then I would want to leverage your platform and your marketplace to make sure that I got quality submissions.
Well, that's a very salient observation of yours. That's our plan. I mean, we see this as a two-sided marketplace now. And our plan here is that we are trying to optimize the sector for all three groups. We understand, and they understand, that they're all related, and the more efficiently they can collaborate, everybody's mission deepens its impact, whether you're the grantor or the grantee. So right now, what we're trying to do, though, is to build software and technology around the grantee's experience. Yeah. There's a lot of software out there built for the grantors because they have the money to pay for it. And so unfortunately, what happens is you have a million different portals and platforms now for different grantors. That means the grantees have to learn 20 different, software platforms as they're going through the year. So we're really trying to kind of push back against that trend.
Sure. And I don't know what the fraud standpoint is, but I mean, if you were also perform a service of ensuring authenticity, that that these funds are going to the right grantee from the grantor, that's also another added bonus as well.
That's the vision that we have, actually, is that we want to move from an application-based system to an invitation-based system in the future. So if the grantors had enough information from Grantable where they could see the landscape and understand who is already a really likely fit and a likely good recipient of their particular funds, we would rather see them inviting groups into conversation with them. So rather than putting out, sort of an opportunity and getting 200 in the door, of whom you're really interested in 20, inviting 30 in the door, knowing that those 20 are, much more likely to receive funding from you. That's what the largest private foundation in the world, the Gates Foundation, they have the resources to be able to scan the world for different groups doing work, and then you get invited to apply. You don't there's not open applications there. So our dream here is that any grantor, regardless of size, would have sort of the same opportunity as Gates to see the landscape that they're interested in supporting, and to be able to reach out to groups and say, hey, you seem to be doing amazing work that aligns with what we're trying to fund. Would you be interested in talking with us? We'd be interested in potentially funding you. And that's a very different reality that I think everybody in that three-sided market that you talked about, Tim, would be interested in reaching. So that's our big mission in our minds when we see, years out where we want to go. That's what guides us.
From a business model perspective, you taking a cut off of someone, or how are you making money?
Yeah, so in this early phase, what we're talking about is a basic, transaction fee similar to a lot of other two-sided marketplaces. But what we think of ourselves as is sort of a SaaS-enabled marketplace. So, I mean, the market will definitely be probably the reason why people are attracted to us, but we want them to stay because we're actually making the whole process of annualized grant seeking so much less painful than it is now through content management, through tools that make you a faster writer, by really pulling in all the different service types that you'll need. So, there's a lot of possibility that our model will change in terms of how we're making money as we add tooling and features and value for people. But really keeping in mind that a lot of grant applicants are not flush. A lot of grant experts, independent contractors are not just raking in the dough. So we definitely want to understand that we're trying to create a valuable relationship with them. And then fortunately, there is a group in that three-sided triangle that has a lot of money, a lot of resources, and that is the grantors. I mean, almost by definition, they have accumulated so much wealth that they are now in the business of giving it away. So those groups are interested in a better system, and I think they're also in a position where they can support maybe a larger share of a system and a platform that's helping everybody win.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, well, I can just think of like other marketplaces that have the challenge of, hey, I connect and then I'm out. Right? Why do I need to come back through? Right? And there's definitely not a SaaS model in there. So for you to be trying to already articulate this and be thinking about it from a SaaS model, from an annualization standpoint, I think it's interesting. It will be interesting to see, like, if you're able to fulfill that, because in so many different things, it's like, hey, thanks for the connection, but I'm out and I'm going somewhere else, and I'll pay your 30% one-time fee, happy for it. But then the churn of those things is spinning so much. It's just it can be a very difficult thing, and so for you to be doing that, it'll be like I said, an interesting cycle to see.
Yeah.
If you get it.
On that note too, I think we are, one of our advisors is really bringing up Web3 and sort of decentralized organizational structures, and it jives really well with what is a growing movement in community-centric fundraising. So both the technology and the philosophy in our space is kind of asking, how can individuals be more greatly empowered in these relationships? And so we are already talking about ways that the people on our platform can actually share in the value that's being created in a totally different way. So, I think it really is all about thinking about Grantable as a platform, as an ecosystem in which people are really, really happy to be in it. And they aren't resentful of, the bridge toll that we're taking. So we want to communicate what the toll is for in the early going. Like, we're helping people navigate a patchwork of interstate regulations about professional fundraising. So we need to help pay for that to happen. But in the future, it should just be that you're getting something valuable just by being on the platform, whether it's organizing your content, finding your clients, just streamlining your business. So we're really trying to aspire to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's super exciting right now with Web3, in terms of it's taken so long for that technology to really get use cases that are applicable. And so it'd be interesting to see. I mean, this is another use case that can be applied. So
yeah, I mean, I think one of somebody I spoke with last week, a venture capital firm, Avalanche VC out of Seattle, one of their principals introduced the term Web 2.5. And so it's kind of like, what are some ways that you can already add some of the most promising features and value from, the coming Web3 evolution to stuff that's happening now. And so I think it's not like we have to wait for some line to be crossed. We can already start thinking about ways to add it in.
I have no idea what Web3 is. I'm I'm trying, guys. Like I doing some research, trying to get it.
It's mind bending. Absolutely,
it really is.
Yeah. Well, see, like, and then when people are like, "Well, this was the internet," and like, it's just like, yeah, but to me, like, the internet was easy, maybe difficult to explain, right? But it was like, okay, people are going to research in this thing. They already had computers. Now there's this other thing. I'm definitely not poo-pooing on it. I'm just trying to grasp and do a little bit of research here and there. I'm probably about 30 hours of research into stuff like this, which maybe isn't a lot, but
one way that I've heard it talked about recently is to think of these sort of cycles of bundling and unbundling. So in the earliest days, you had the mainframe, so you had the one computer, and then you unbundled and everybody had personal computers. And then you rebundled to the cloud. And so everybody kind of put back, and then now you're kind of back into an unbundling where Web3 is decentralizing computation, storage, decision-making, transactions.
See, I get decentralizing, I get blockchain technology, I get all that kind of stuff. But the use case of NFTs, I think, is maybe that specifically. Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's that decentralization that you have.
Decentralized is what Napster was, right? I mean, it's it's the downloading of things that have a.
Yeah, but it's not a file share. It's more of a store of record, so that you have that.
Right, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, building a company at this time, even it's funny because, like, you can look at grants as something fairly mundane, but then when you talk about building a technology company to improve this sector, I mean, it very quickly becomes about who these grant experts. Somebody, one of our experts, just shared this beautiful encapsulation of what he considers to be sort of the art form, left brain, right brain. Like, you're both a very logical but also artful communicator. So it starts to come to life. And when you talk about the different technologies, the great social trends that our company is launching into, as far as movement towards gig and remote work, and then Web3, and it all interacts, and it's something that it keeps it fun, or some nights stressful, but mostly it's really cool to be building a company at this time, I think.
Wikipedia defines Web3 as an idea for a new iteration of the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
Which is what WWW is, people. Don't forget that. Based on blockchains, which incorporates concepts including decentralized and token-based. Oh, I gotta click ... Token-based economics.
Yeah.
Well, I like to call the WWW the information superhighway. I think we should have never dropped that, but that's just me.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn.
There is a lot, and it's not going to happen on this show.
Well, hey, but when we get to episode 1000, we'll be NFT millionaires, billionaires.
What episode is this?
92.
Ooh, getting up there. Wow.
908 to go to get to 1000. So
have us back on for that one.
For sure. Yeah, definitely would like to have you back on. And 6 months, 12 months, something there in between, I would get an update on where everything is going. I love the passion that you have for the grant writing space.
And then you can talk to the other half of this thing and get a much better technical overview of what we're doing and what's exciting in that space, and all the ways that we've covered ground until the next time we speak.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
I think it's been a really fun conversation. I would just encourage people out there. I think almost everybody knows a nonprofit or a group that is touched by grant funding. And if you don't know about it, ask if folks need help with this task. And I think most people will kind of you'll see their eyes widen when they talk about grants, because they really are a very challenging aspect of the work. They can be confusing, they can be repetitive, time consuming, and then they are such critical sources of funding for a lot of groups. So if you know anybody that you think might be grant funded, or if you know folks that write grants or help with grants for a living, please feel free to turn them on to grantable.co and see if they think it's valuable. And we're very, very easy to get in touch with. So always looking to learn from people out there that are doing the work.
Perfect.
All right, Philip, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for the honor. Take care, guys.
Peace,
See
y'all.
ya.
Bye.